our first speakers today is Atiya Mahmood. She is a PhD and an associate professor in the gerontology department at Simon Fraser University. And her PhD is in architecture with a focus on environment behavior studies. Her research focuses on older adults, persons with disabilities, mobility, social inclusion and exclusion and participation, and physical environment and health. Her recent research in area of mobility, access, and participation can be summarized as the development of comprehensive and validated user-led tools and environmental assessments for older adults and people with disabilities, and development of evidence-based knowledge translation tools, such as videos and photo voice exhibits in mobility and participation for diverse groups of people using a community-based participatory process. And with her are Thomas Ford and Bahare Kardeh. They are both project managers. Thomas is a PhD student in the Department of Gerontology and previous research coordinator on this project. And Bahare is the project coordinator on.
Good. Jen knows me well. Nice to meet everyone.
On this on the MAP-SWAN project. And her research focuses on accessibility and assistive technology for people with disabilities. So there is Atiya that's going to present, and Thomas and Bahare are going to be in the background and answering any questions if needed. So please go ahead. Thank you. Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Good afternoon. I was muted.
Yeah, no worries.
Everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to getting your feedback and have a discussion around what we present. So I'm going to screen share my slides so that you get to see what we are going to present. 1 second. So can everybody see the slides? Okay, great.
Yes, I can.
And so the title has already been said, is looking at built environment from street intersection to parks, and looking at it specifically for communities, accessibility in communities, specifically for people with different kinds of disabilities and also older adults. So we are coming here, the whole team, from the unceded territories of Squamish, Musqueam, and the Swallowtail Nation. Both our universities are located in this territory, and we are very pleased to be joining you from here. As they have said, and you'll see all of us here, there's myself and Thomas who are going to both present, and Bahare would be sort of joining in the question answer session, and Mike is going to specifically focus on the parks section, which he has been coordinating and managing. All of us are part of the Mobility Access Participation Project as well as the PARCOURS project. So for the first part, where both Thomas and I are presenting, I'll just introduce the project, saying that why are we even doing this project, and then talk about the MAP partnership, which is the Mobility Access Partnership Project, which is currently ongoing, and also the Precursor Project, which it is sort of linked. It is another project that was funded through Social Science and Humanities Research Council, the Canadian Disability Participation Project. We have so many names, so that's why we use the acronyms. DEMAND was the project we started building SWAN for persons with disability, and DEMAND stands for Enabling Mobility and Access among people with disabilities. And we have expanded it within the MAP project, and you'll see what is going on and get a picture of it. And then wrap up, we'll focus on the MAP-SWAN project more so, where Thomas will come and talk about how we are getting participatory research done in that part. And then we'll have a brief question answer period after this, and before that, we'll show a very short video that we have developed as part of this project. And then Mike will pick on and talk about how we are doing these similar things in the context of parks. So the context is that why are we even doing this? About 2 million people, Canadians here, have some kind of mobility disability, and 80% of these people use assistive devices, all different types of devices. And according to the International Classification of Functioning and Disability, this is a WHO standardization, is that disability or the opposite of it, which is social participation, results from interaction between persons' ability and limitations and the social and physical environment. So if there is so accessibility is if there is a good match, fit between what their competence or ability is and how does the environment foster it or create barriers. So both of the definitions are coming from a health, but more like social definitions or social context of health. And then different research, and many of it in public health area, has shown that the mobility and access is that is enabled through supportive physical and social environment is linked to independence, health, quality of life, well-being among people with mobility or people who use assistive devices as well as sensory disability. And older adults are in the mix of it given their proportion of mobility and sensory disabilities. So this picture, as you can see, this was from one of our this was from a CIHR funded grant where we looked at Portland and Vancouver. And this was a picture of one of our participants trying to cross a road that is multi-lane to get to services. And so how does that person do it? Is it very conducive? So this gives you a flavor of why this kind of things are important. Often our built environments are not designed to facilitate people to move around and go to places and do things and be independent. Based on the different types of research we have been doing, what we saw is that if our participants can become co-researchers in the project and be able to document the barriers to the neighborhood or the facilitators, not everything is a barrier, then they are much more engaged in the process, and they can learn how to vocalize and advocate for change themselves. Any projects or programs that are introduced are much more sustainable because of their buy-in, overall they become much more aware about inclusive neighborhoods. So this is another picture from our project in the Demand project, where our participants is trying to figure out how to do is this the sidewalk or what is happening there? How do I even get to where we are going to go? So just a brief idea of what is this MAP project, the Mobility Access Participation. This is a 7-year funded project through Social Science Humanities Research Council in Canada. And we are looking at 3 different interrelated areas of research and also intervention and evaluation. So one stream is looking at navigation and accessibility in environment, and I am one of the stream leads in this, and the SWAN project that we're going to talk about falls directly under this. But as you can see, transportation accessibility is related very closely with other navigation and pedestrian environmental wayfinding, those kinds of things. And the third one is social accessibility. So we have different projects going under each of this stream. They are all interrelated, but we have categorized them under certain streams. So SWAN falls under the first stream. So this project we started working on 2022, and we have 7 years of funding. So we are hoping to work in partnership with different stakeholders, including people in the health authority. So one of the major tasks within our project in the SWAN project, which stands for Stakeholders, Walkability, Wheelability, Audit in Neighborhoods. So SWAN is so much more elegant to say than all that mouthful. So we'll just keep on mentioning it as SWAN, is to explore the neighborhood accessibility, which is basically to see barriers and facilitators. But that is not the only goal, though that's one of the goals, because there are many different ways of doing it. Other people have already developed instruments that do it pretty well. But our goal was to integrate it with persons with lived experiences or community participants in actually being very engaged in the process. So another major goal is building citizens' capacity to advocate for these improvements in this area. And then also, it's not just the persons with lived experience, older adults or persons with disability, but another key component are stakeholders who have some capacity and power to do change. So these are could be municipalities, this could be health authorities, this could be senior or disability serving organizations. So the partnership, and the name it is through a partnership grant, is partnership between some researchers and the community with persons with lived experience and stakeholders like municipal and other officials. So this helps to build the relationship, and what we have been finding even with small projects, that the projects are more sustainable, the relationships are more sustainable, and then older adults and persons with disability are much more engaged in the process, and they want to be engaged in the process. So that is the objective of why we are doing the SWAN project the way we are doing it. This started quite just some time ago in 2014. I received a fellowship to go and develop a tool that was participatory. We had been working on projects even before that, since the 1990s, where we were working and collecting data. But what we found is that lack of participation we went to our participants and asked some questions, but they were not involved in the process. And then we did a small photo voice project where we saw people were so engaged and they really wanted to be more engaged in the project. So this resulted us with working with some participants and other stakeholders in Germany to develop a shorter tool which our participants could use and actually monitor and audit their own neighborhood with help and assistance from us in the research team. So this was funded through a grant in Germany, and we adapted an existing tool that was focusing on seniors. And so the first version of SWAN was for seniors, the walkability audit by seniors in their own neighborhoods. And as you can see, all the photographs we are showing are sort of coming from our project. So these are our German participants with our research team member sort of saying, oh, I don't like this, I like that, and all kinds of things. And the tool was developed and piloted there in 3 neighborhoods. So it started in 2014, and then we got funding. I returned from Germany. I was there for a short time. The Canadian Disability Participation Project was another partnership grant that had just got funded around 2016, and I was part of the team. So the task was to then take it from seniors and expand it and bring the focus of accessibility, wayfinding, and other issues, and pilot it here in Vancouver with our Metro Vancouver with persons with disabilities. Specifically at that stage, we were looking at persons who use assistive devices like scooters, wheelchairs, walkers, those kinds of things. So that was a 3-year project where we did it successfully. And I saw one of our partners from New Westminster in the audience group. So I will just go over that part. And then because of the success of that project, we applied for more funding. And then we got the new funding that started around 2020 and it's going to go on till 2027. And that is what we are going to show, how our participation and other aspects have really increased, and starting from the ground level. So what is the SWAN tool? It has 5 different areas of information that we collect, or our participants, who we call co-researchers, collect. Is looking at function of what is happening, function of the environment, and then safety and security aspects. But what we have found from research and also looking at literature out there and all the other very good studies that have been done is that it is not just the function and safety, but how does it look? Is it well maintained, affects person to be out and about and using those spaces? Then also what kind of supportive features are there? These are destinations. Are there third places? Are there amenities? Does it serve our audience group? And then the last aspect is social, because people don't just go and walk around and do things. They also want to interact with people. So these are the 5 things that we have different categories under the audit that we collect information in. And then we get some more contextual information, because we're looking at street block level or street segment level of information, but people don't just walk on one segment. They have the whole area under consideration. So we collect some more qualitative kind of data around what is the overall traffic situation there, how are the drivers behaving there, is there a feeling of sense of safety and security, is it convenient, what is the wayfinding issues. So together we have the SWAN tool and also a secondary observation tool that our participants work with us as co-researchers to collect this information. So the first project, which was the precursor to the MAP project, was the demand project under the Canadian Disability Participation Project. There we looked at 3 different municipalities. One of our partner municipality was New Westminster, the other one was North Vancouver, and the third one was Vancouver, where we did this project. We have participants using mobility devices go about, collect data, and then we met with them, did the data analysis with them. They selected things that they wanted to be showcased. And then we developed some knowledge mobilization tools, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit here. Before doing that, I just wanted to say that that was our original project, but because of this partnership with different community groups and the municipalities, the SWAN then expanded to be some smaller projects also beyond our own funded project with the 3 municipalities. We were approached by Better Environmentally Sound Transportation, City of Burnaby, which they received a small funding from the Vision Zero projects that are going on in Metro Vancouver, and Fraser Health Authority funded that. So there was a nice partnership. As you can now see, others are coming into the mix in this. And then SFU was the research team. So City of Burnaby groups of older adults and persons in their accessibility committee joined with the city staff and also BEST staff and our team, and they identified some hotspot areas in Burnaby, which we then did use a shorter version of SWAN, just looking more at function and safety, because Vision Zero's focus is there, and collected data. And using that data, they were able to make some changes in those areas. I'm not going to go into detail of that. We have a whole different presentation. This is a picture of our team at one of those data collection points. But then also SWANs, I was approached by people from New York, occupational therapists who wanted to look at outdoor falls prevention. So we then generated a outdoor falls prevention version of it, which has been then 3 boroughs in New York. They've collected the data on it, and they have been working with that. And then also Seniors on the Move project, which was a BEST project, and they are still doing some work. They wanted to pilot the tool in different places, so they did that. Immigration Service BC, the Services BC, they wanted to pilot with immigrant seniors. So you can see that this original project then generated. So one of the things I think is of interest to this group is that what can you do with a tool like this? How can I use it? So I'll be just giving you a flavor of how that could be done with our research team working as a collaborative partner. So after we had collected the original demand SWAN data, we didn't want to just sit there and write academic publications, which we did, but we wanted to do more than that, because this is community engagement, building partnerships. So we developed some knowledge mobilization or knowledge translation tools, and we wanted something that to be very participatory. So our persons with lived experiences sort of said, okay, we want to highlight these things that I want the community out there to know about us. So using that participatory process, we developed a game, which is called On the Move. It's a participation inclusion game. A picture of the game board is provided there. And also a video series with the 3 municipalities, with each of participants being the main actors and agents within so it is them. And we'll show the City of Vancouver video today to give you a flavor of the others are available if people are interested. And then we also did part of that larger project beyond the SWAN. People were also doing photographs of their neighborhood. So we developed a photo voice display for each of the areas. And because of that, it resulted in some inclusive community forums. People came and it's interactive. We didn't just talk about our projects. People actually went and watched the video, played the game, talked to our participants. Many of them were there. City stakeholders came in, people from health authority and other stakeholders were there. So it was very interactive, interesting forums. We did 4 of that, like large-scale forums, but then each city invited us to go over and present our findings to them for the specific city. We did that. So there were all these kind of interaction and knowledge mobilization, which then resulted in forming a much stronger partnership. And we were able to partner with 6 cities for the MAP project, which is the next project that started. And so we are now partnering with Vancouver, North Vancouver, Surrey, Richmond, and Burnaby and New Westminster. So all are formally partnering, these cities are partnering with us in this ongoing project. So from here on, I'm going to hand it over to Thomas, who's going to talk about specifically what's going on in the MAP, and then we'll end up with the little video. So Thomas, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Satya. So under the current MAP-SWAN project, we're using newly adapted versions of the SWAN tool to co-research with 3 key populations, including people who are living with dementia or mild cognitive impairment, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, as well as people who are living with mobility disabilities, as we had in the previous project. So within the present study, people aged 19 and older can participate, but our team is actively working to recruit older adults just to ensure that we're capturing the perspectives of the aging population. So we have been actively collecting data since May 2022 at pre and co-identified intersections within our 6 partner municipalities that Atia just mentioned. So during a typical data collection session, a participant works with 2 of our research assistants for 3 to 4 hours to assess up to 4 intersections. So the typical pathway for collecting data is shown on the screen in the top corner. So as you can see in the diagram, we audit street crossings, but we also walk along assessing the presence and absence of such items such as curb cuts, pedestrian signals, crosswalks and sidewalks, as well as the surrounding neighborhood to capture the perspectives on the social environment. So in order to prepare for the current project, our team was required to adapt the previous mobility-focused SWAN tool to now account for the experiences of those with hearing disabilities as well as dementia, and work with our 6 municipalities to co-identify the data collection sites. Next slide. So the process to adapt the SWAN tool to account for the experiences of people with different disabilities and preparing the research team to do this field work occurred in 4 iterative phases. So phase 1 included a literature consultation where significant concepts were derived and then reviewed by persons with lived experience as well as field experts. Then in phase 2, we tested the tools. So this included having the research team practice using the new tools, as well as piloting with persons with lived experience and obtaining their feedback. Subsequently, in phase 3, we refined the tools to integrate the feedback and more specifically simplify the tool's language, as well as the sequencing. Additionally, when refining the tools, the research team also created data collection guides, as well as protocols for each population. So for example, through the pilot, we learned that it would be best to have people with dementia select intersections that they would audit, instead of sending them to areas for data collection that may extend beyond the neighborhoods that they're actually familiar with. So additionally, within this phase for the dementia stream, we also pre-identified objective questions that could be answered by the research team rather than the participant themselves. So for example, the research assistants answer questions such as, there is a crosswalk, yes or no? And the participants answer more subjective questions such as whether the crosswalk is wide enough. The goal of this is to reduce the overall burden on the participants within this stream. Furthermore, within the dementia stream, the research assistants also read the questions to the participants and work closely with them to address any questions they have at the time. Comparatively, in our hearing and mobility streams, participants are actually trained on how to use the tools themselves. And while the research assistants do support this data collection, the session is really a lot more guided by the participant themselves in this stream. So lastly, in phase 4, the research team also engaged in sensitivity training to prepare for engaging in the field with the various different populations that we're working with. So this included a series of 3 workshops that were co-designed by one of our community advisory committee members. Yeah, so next slide, please. Okay, so in line with our community engaged approach, the research team took several steps to co-identify and decide on our sites for data collection for the mobility and hearing streams. Our collaborative approach started internally with the research team developing what we have coined as hotspots, which are in essence areas with within our partner municipalities that based on our selection criteria may pose challenges to barrier-free community mobility and accessibility. So in order to identify these hotspots, our team used open source GIS data and then overlaid it. So the data included intersections with a high number of pedestrian accidents, mixed land use, and proximity to transportation hubs such as SkyTrain stations. The output of this was the maps that you can see on the right side of the screen. So hotspots within these maps are shown with pink and red dots, with the red dots actually representing intersections with a higher number of accidents. So once our team identified these hotspots, research team members who were familiar with the areas then went to do observation and take photos of the areas with purpose of having a current understanding of what these intersections look like in real time. So subsequently for each municipality, we identified 8 to 10 potential data collection sites that were then reviewed by municipal representatives and narrowed down to 3 to 4 potential sites to be reviewed by local and community project partners, as well as persons with lived experience at an interactive forum, which you can see pictured also on the screen. So during our interactive hybrid stakeholders forum this past March, we explored the feasibility of actually collecting data at these sites, as well as the capacity for change within these sites. So subsequently, the forum helped us solidify a final list of sites for data collection within each of our partner municipalities. Next slide. Oh, sorry, next slide. Thanks, Adia. So following the event, the research team reviewed all of the transcripts and Google Jamboards for each municipality to create a summary of the discussions, as well as work to identify cross-cutting challenges and suggested improvements experienced common to all 6 partner municipalities. So the summaries that we created are pictured on the screen. We also shared a survey within each summary for the purpose of gaining insight into how and at what point within the project people wish to be engaged and involved. So these results have allowed us to pinpoint key stakeholders to work with as the project progresses, but also align our team efforts with the goals and interests of our specific collaborators. Next slide.
For some reason, my slides are not moving forward. I don't know why. It's just stuck here. There, now it's.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Adia. So as of now, the research team is collecting data with people who are hard of hearing or deaf, as well as people with mobility disabilities, and we'll be finishing up with the cognitive stream at the end of September. So moving forward, we'll disseminate our findings back to the municipalities and work closely with them to consider the implications of our findings, as well as plan events to explore them with other community organizations and stakeholders. So we'll also move towards adapting the data collection instruments in early spring to account for the experiences of those who are partially sighted or blind, using the process and lessons that we learned from the previous adaptations. So as mentioned, the project will continue to 2027. We're going to continue to conduct ongoing research to assess the proposed interventions and hopefully continue to learn from our partners and persons with lived experience.
So just jumping in, and I know we are a little behind in scheduling, so we'll leave the question answer at the end and just show the video, and Mike will start right after. Is that the goal and implication is that what do we do with all of this? We are doing knowledge mobilization and other things. One is the larger goal of the whole partnership project is to guide policy and generate some intervention projects where we can work with municipalities, health authorities, and other community partners and come and do some pre-post kind of findings so that they can go and do use it, scale it out, or scale it, or use it as a guidance moving forward for foster more stronger partnerships to enable persons with disabilities to vocalize their thoughts and also guide some future research. And as I said, like in the demand project, the SWAN is flexible enough that we can adapt it for different settings. The dementia one I wanted to mention because people might consider this is all very urban, is that there is a Demscape project going on, and they're going to take and they're going to use the dementia tool that we have developed in Northern BC as well as here in Metro Vancouver. So I'm going to start the video now, and then we'll move on to Mike's presentation right after that.
I was about December 2012, and I broke my back, and there were complications, ongoing complications. Didn't get it though. So. This is a power assist chair, and I think without it, I wouldn't have get around here.
Only time I ever remember understanding that was different was when the kids started saying that I was different around 7. Up until then, didn't even know having PT was something different. So.
The actual surface and the slope and the gradient of what you're pushed down makes a huge difference. I think that the hardest surface is a sidewalk that's tilted. You wouldn't believe that, like 1 degree would do it, but it's just tiny little things like that. It used to be very low-key area, became more popular, more crowded, and in a way that's sad because the old Kitsilano is gone and it's all chain stores and like. Not all of them are as accessible as you think. But there's no button, so you have to do it yourself. It's very difficult to, get in. And so I just don't go in there. I'm not saying that we're necessarily excluded in everything, because we're not. But it's always as an additional aspect of it.
Like racism, sexism, ableism underground. We have a more polite, etiquette way of avoiding the issue, you know?
But grocery is kind of needs to hang out. And I'm a foodie, so I like hanging out in grocery stores and doing things and chatting. Yeah. I think for a lot of people in the chair, it's too much of a hassle. If there were more people with disabilities and mobility devices moving around on the streets, people would then be more aware of them.
I would call cycling a mobility aid. I would call a car a mobility aid. Start thinking about what you use as a mobility aid too. Transit at this point, easy as pie for me. I go fairly long distances. My world is not specifically to Toronto. It's different parts of Vancouver.
You put in the Greenway. So from my house all the way down to Broad, the neighbor, the sponsor of the car. And it'd be a couple of times I've done from Yansan all the way home. And, I'm proud of that.
Rather than using my disability as an art or whatever, I've also used it as an advantage to get to know people. Less you are able to do what you're able to do, that becomes even more precious.
So that's the video, and we'll wrap up our part here, and I'll stop sharing, and Mike will start sharing and talking about the PARCOURS project now. Mike, you're not.
I know. I think Anita, you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
She was
I was
just saying
doing
how
so
amazing
well.
I am.
I know, right? I was being all smooth and it didn't work out. Okay, I'll try again. So Mike Prescott is a manual wheelchair user of 35 years who is postdoctoral researcher in geomatics, rehabilitation sciences, and gerontology, with degrees in urban planning, business administration, kinesiology, and rehabilitation sciences. He has professional experience working with cities, parks, and other organizations, helping them design and manage more accessible, inclusive spaces. He is currently the lead for the Accessible Organizations Project that requires organizations to develop accessibility committees and plans. So welcome. Thanks for being here, and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to talk about in my few minutes here is basically complementary to what Thomas and Tia talked about, but focusing on parks. And so our project called PARCOURS is, as you can see on the screen, providing accessible recreation outdoors, user-driven research on standards. So similar to what Tia mentioned in her presentation, why are we even taking a look at this? So for many of the same reasons, the parks are an opportunity and experience that offers physical, social, health, and mental benefits for people with disabilities. And it's an economic benefit for society when we can offer everybody the same experiences, and they can be involved in that. So there are also equity principles, and as was the last thing in my little description there around legislation is you have the Accessible Canada Act, and more recently the Accessible BC Act, and some of the standards that might be developed that impact both the urban environment and park environment. So the purpose of this study was to be able to go out and ask people with a variety of disabilities to help shape the experiences that they have in parks. And for me, as a person with a disability, parks are an amazing opportunity. If I could, I spend lots of time doing accessibility assessments in parks, and it's so enjoyable. I don't even know I'm working. So it can be so, I think it's such an underestimated resource for everybody. And I think there may be some misunderstandings as to sometimes as to what it is people with disabilities want to do in parks. And so some of that is what we're trying to get at with this project. So the primary objective was to inform national park accessibility standards, because this was a project that was funded by Accessibility Standards Canada. And so I was a member of the Outdoor Standards Committee at one point, and there are similar things that are just about to start in BC as well. They're looking to find ways of harmonizing some of the accessibility standards that are taking place. So that was our sort of our main objective. But I think in some ways for us as academics and as people with disabilities some of the secondary objectives of, how do we go beyond standards? Because that mindset is far too constrictive. And how can we have that idea of inclusion strategy in our brains, and making accessibility and inclusion just a way of doing business. So hopefully in the future, it's not like, accessibility and inclusion is, okay, how do we add that on to a strategy or whatever it might be? Because it inevitably gets left off the plate. And I would even say that some of the developments in or how diversity, equity, and inclusion have gone, people with disabilities have sort of dropped off that that concept. So we wanted to address some of that as it relates to how people will use parks, and really be able to promote opportunities in the future that give people accessibility to healthy experiences. So the project that we did was using several methods. We had a scoping review of international standards so that we can be able to see where Canada currently exists within this spectrum of accessibility, and see how we can go beyond that. We did park assessments of 3 parks in different settings. So we looked at Grouse Mountain, Dees Island, and Boundary Bay to get some slightly different, terrains and different settings and different challenges that people with disabilities would face. And then we had this wide range of people with disabilities. So that would include people who were using manual and power wheelchairs, scooters, walkers and canes and crutches, as well as those who have who are blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, and those with a variety of cognitive impairments. And so we took them through the parks, walking and wheeling interviews, where we'd ask them questions about their experiences and specific things that that came with the SWAN tool as well. So we would go along and we'd look at a bench, and there would be a series of questions that could be answered about that, as to whether or not subjectively that individual found that to be an accessible feature in the park. In addition to features, and I think the biggest thing with accessibility is the actual trails, and it's the same for in the urban environment, the sidewalks and the crosswalks and the curb ramps. I mean, my day-to-day travels is usually filled with frustrations in the urban environment, where I have these expectations that it's going to be quite accessible for me. My expectations lower in the park environment, but you still obviously there's limitations based on different disability types sometimes as to what's going to be accessible. Oh, and the last part, and we're just working on this, is the Delphi panel, which is a series of surveys we've sent out across Canada to ask people to sort of prioritize and be able to hone in better on the types of standards that they would like to see for national parks. And in terms of analysis, one of the things that we're using, and I think this analysis element might be of quite a bit of interest to others, is using this idea of geo-narratives. So what a geo-narrative is simply, storytelling with maps. And what we were able to do is sort of add layers of information that we gain from all of these data inputs and start to make stories out of them. And so the map that you see there just sort of shows some of the results from one of I think this is Boundary Bay, where each of the features listed there, this is around the beach, and they'll talk about whether or not they found it accessible and why. So we get some very rich mixed data around what it is to have a park experience, which can be quite powerful. And it allows us, this approach allows us to start looking at patterns. And we can say, I could look at this map and say, well, let's just look at people who are ambulatory. So anyone who's walking and not using a wheeled mobility device. I could compare maybe 2 groups and get a better idea of where there might be gaps or differences with those groups. And so that hopefully will allow planners and health people promoting healthy experiences to really hone in on strategic decisions and ways of delivering programs that actually match the context that people will actually be experiencing the park in. So one of the things that we started to formulate from this incomplete data at this point, but is that we, from a strategic standpoint, it's really critical to first be able to identify the challenges that exist, be able to map those challenges, and through that process, you really can learn a lot from what it is that you think are the priorities in terms of what needs to be done, and then learn from that to be able to actually find improvement solutions to improve the environment. But none of this would happen without continuous engagement of people with disabilities. And again, with the SWAN project, that's one of the main focus. Without and it needs to be broadly thought of, because if you just focused on, like, our demand project was a little more focused on certain groups, and if you only focus on that, it's very difficult sometimes to have a solution and a strategy that's going to be a little more robust. And if you're only focusing on one group, you might not get the return on investment you want. So again, it's that continuous engagement that will help to move that forward in a more sustainable way. And so what we did with this project and other projects is we now have this lens that I've called GEMMA, which is just a journey experience mapping model for accessibility. And all it is based on, again, slightly different research where we ask people, how do you actually plan your trip to a park? And so what they've really focused on was 3 areas: was preparing for the trip, and planning for the trip, which I'll explain in a little more detail in a second, and being able to enjoy the trip. So it's a different, slightly different lens. Park planners, I think, already have something very similar. They look at how visitors move through parks and how that's how guides their planning. Now we're adding the accessibility layer to that. And so again, so with preparation, which is different from planning, it's more about, am I physically able to take on a park? Where am I, have I taken care of my equipment? I know I rarely remember to inflate my tires. If I don't do that, trip gets really bumpy, or I risk, having a flat tire kind of thing. The next step, okay, so I now decided, yep, I can take on the world. Where do I want to go, and what information is available for me to make those decisions? And I need to know what challenges there are for me, and what. So that sort of sets my expectations of what I'm going to get at that park. So ultimately, that means, okay, what will the experience be like at the destination? And so those are the more common things that we think about with accessibility in parks. What obstacles and hazards will I face, and how will this affect how I enjoy my visit? And so underneath all of that are the participants in this study really focused on these 4 areas. So weather was something that really impacted the preparation stage. So, if you're going up to grouse in December, don't wear shorts like I did for an interview. Obstacles and hazards in the environment, that's really kind of the participants really put that as part of their planning phase. And then ultimately infrastructure, like, really impacted how I actually was able to enjoy the experience. And another way of looking at it is just, you've got this ecosystem of factors that are contextual. So, what's the purpose of my trip? So in an urban environment, for instance, if I'm going somewhere, say for a job interview, I really want to reduce the amount of effort I'm putting into something, because I don't want to get to the meeting all sweaty, which I think was something that came up actually in the photo voice that Atia did with one of the participants a few years ago. the other aspects are wayfaring, wayfinding. So that's where a lot of my research is focused on. So I think most people know, wayfinding is that so the network of whether it's streets and sidewalks and crosswalks or in parks, it's the links to paths and trails. So being able to know what path is even there. But for people with disabilities, the wayfaring aspect of it, which is like the barriers and burden, safety and enjoyment of the actual environment, has to also be taken into consideration. So as was mentioned before, it's not just about barriers, there's facilitators. Well, a barrier is an object that basically impedes my progress along a trail, whereas burden is the accumulated effects of the journey. So that could be the more effort I have to put in, or the more time or cost or whatever it might be to get to my ultimate destination. So if I want to get to the lake where the beach is, it could be that the trail is really rough. So that's going to increase my burden, even though the length of it might be the same as what you could do for a nice, easy path. And then there's information and temporal aspects. So what works in the summer, or what works when I'm 20 versus when I'm 70, these are other aspects of the factors that take into place. And one of the easiest and probably most impactful that we heard from in the Parcours project was information. Let me know what's there. Don't tell me what's accessible, because accessibility is actually not a thing. It's very much connected to what I can do, what I want to do, and what the environment offers. And so, thinking about those 5 elements is one way of helping to, whether it's policy or design, programming, hopefully that can help to inform better decision making. And again, this is something that while we did it in parks, it's applicable beyond this. There's the Accessibility Standards Committee and the federal government hopes that what we do in national parks will be sort of trickled down to the regional, provincial, and regional and municipal parks. For me in particular, I think it's municipal parks that will ultimately be where, if this is adopted by municipalities, the standards are adopted there, that's where the big impact is, especially from health promotion perspective, because that's where you spend most of your time. The nearest national park to many of the population centers is quite far away. You need a car. Transit options and shuttles are often not accessible or not feasible. So it's really those more local types of parks where hopefully this will actually make an impact.